And when you give up your will to do your own will, like mine was all about let His will be done. And I believe that God called me to reconcile with Him first and then reconcile with my spouse. So as I tried to reconcile, how they take it or how they receive it, I can't be responsible for that. I can only be responsible for what God's called me to do.
So Diane, that's a very complex journey that you have served God for the last 22 years, and this identity that you have formed in the ministry, in the women ministry, and in the home and in the community comes to an end, right? And then you're left to look for another identity. Can you tell us, like, what happened for this life that you have had, the marriage where you're not supposed to divorce, because we know in Catholic Church divorce is not allowed, but things happens nowadays. Can you take us through that journey? What brought you to this point of things that were not supposed to happen?
You know, it's like a pie. When you get married, two become one. And life happens, and, you know, we had kids, and my husband was a businessman, and, you know, he goes to bring, you know, the finances in and things like that. And on the outside, even being involved in the church looks good.
Yes.
Because we're there all together and so on. So on the outside, we're looking at what does that look like? For me, in the piece of the pie, if we look at the pie as our marriage, I was very busy with kids. I couldn't stay up late nights because I was exhausted by the time the end of the day would come. My husband started to work longer hours. Other people came in and were part of our life that interfere. And to be quite honest, Terry, I'm going to be really open about this right now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, there's sometimes that comes into your life if you don't safeguard your marriage. Other people will try to come and be the guard in your marriage, and then they step into a place that can maybe be a vulnerable place in your marriage. So the truth is, adultery became part of our marriage. So it's not now me and my husband, it's me and my husband and some other person that was part of this destruction. Sometimes it's not the adultery that really was the only thing that led to that, but things started to fall apart, and the biggest thing is the communication. So when I got married, I married an older man. I was a princess. He treated me like royalty, like it was beautiful. But as soon as I started to have children, I got busy. I got extended. I couldn't balance. So balance was another one. So we've got communication, balance, and then people that come in your life. And the expectations, not just of you, but from your spouse, you know. So there was this whole picture of little things that weren't dealt with that just ended up being the result of my husband leaving. And then in that place, though, for me, your unworthiness gets, you know, you still don't become more worthy. I stopped eating. I started to become really emotional, where I wanted to skunk out the lie, because there was so much protection out there for the sin that, and you know, let me just say this, you know, sometimes when you're not healed or you're hurting, you hurt other people. And so I've always asked God to bless my husband, because then my kids would be blessed. That was something I never gave up. Right, even in the midst of my own stuff and my anger and my frustration, because we do go through a grieving period. I went through a grieving period. I went through a loss. I even went through walking with other people and ministers who wanted to try to reconcile us. When you're in business or when you're in a community, everybody gets to know. And so therefore the shame became big. So how was I going to go forward navigating a divorce while I'm also going to find who I am? So I went through this journey of just trying to discover, who was I in the midst of that? Do you deserve it? No. Did it happen? Yes. So that's where faith started to rise up, because you wouldn't know that.
No.
Someone else may not know that, but God knows it. So he met me right in those dark nights. He met me when I was on my face praying. He met me when it was really hard. There was a lot of deception, and I'm not just saying from my husband, but what happens, the trickle effect happens in the church. And then the women that you've been ministering to, the ones that have talked at the sink, that you've prayed for, that you've done life with, all of a sudden can't believe you're going through a divorce. And then they question you. How dare you? How could you do that to your kids? So it's like a real snowball of emotional distress.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how isolating that can feel for a person to go through that. And it's unfortunate, very unfortunate, that in churches and many communities and organizations, when somebody is going through hard time, instead of embracing them, they are just filled with judgment. And that brings me to think of that saying that says, everybody is fighting a battle that we know nothing about, so be kind to people. Because some people, they are just judging from what they are thinking is right. I can see as a woman in leadership, especially leading a women ministry for a long time, they're looking at you as a role model, and as like you should know everything about not getting divorced. But the enemy does not, there's nowhere an enemy cannot go, right? So what would you say was the things that you mentioned? There was no balance, the communication was a factor, and then before the adultery and things like that. Is there, like, for somebody who is going through that right now, because marriages are failing so badly in the church, in everywhere else, marriages are failing very fast. So for you, as you've been there, I know you're still healing and you're in that journey, because I don't think you can ever recover from that kind of life, because that kind of thing, you spend half of your life in that marriage. Up to that point, it's most of your life you used in that marriage, 20 years plus, right? What can you tell a person who is right there and going through a hard time and not knowing what to do or how to tackle their marriage, in the ministry or not in the ministry?
Well, I think that for me, it's like you have to be willing and able. They have to work together. If you're able but not willing, you can't change another person. So first you have to ask yourself, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do, and what are you able to do? And, I did what I thought I could do to try to bring resolve to some of the areas that were a problem, and then presented those at a time where I knew where I needed counseling with my husband. I would need, counseling for the kids. I had to go through a place of how do we restore brokenness. That's what I put out there. What was I willing to do as a mom and as a wife, and to make it work? And then knowing that I'm able, but presenting that doesn't mean that the other person is willing and able. They might be willing and not able, but they have to be together. A lot of times they're able to, but they're not willing. And when you give up your will to do your own will, like mine was all about let His will be done. And I believe that God called me to reconcile with Him first, and then reconcile with my spouse. So as I tried to reconcile, how they take it or how they receive it, I can't be responsible for that. I can only be responsible for what God's called me to do. And so in this place, I went through 2 Chronicles 7:14, where it says, if my people who are called by my name repent of their sins, turn from their evil and wicked ways, I will hear their prayer, I will answer them, and I will heal their land. So Terry, one of the real key things I believe is being willing and able. And the other thing I had to do was, what was I willing to lay down? That was maybe the busyness. Like we say that we're busy, but I wanted to be fruitful. I want to have I want a good marriage. I wanted those things. I believed I had a happily ever after. I don't think any girl goes into marriage believing, oh, I think we're going to be married and then next year we're not.
Yes.
It wasn't like that for me. It was, I was going to have the happily ever after. That's not what happened.
Yeah. There's something you mentioned. You said that sometimes there are people you invite in your marriage or in your relationships, and these people don't have good intentions when they come in. You have a relationship, they step in other areas. Did you invite someone in your, or did something happen for somebody who interfered with your marriage?
So actually, that's absolutely a good question, because intention is part of one of the areas I try to help women with.
Okay.
What is our intention, right? So I had, in these cases, because there was more than one, I was working with women at that time, and I was looking after their children, or I was helping them to get started again, or I'd babysit their children so they can go and have that job or interview. And so what happens is you kind of open up the boundaries. So now you're a mom, you've got kids, so you're open up to another mom who has a child, and she could be a single mom. So right away, I didn't have the framework or the boundaries or the communication that would keep us close as a couple, which I think is really important. If I'm going to be reaching out to a woman, I need to know that my husband's intentions also are going to be towards me, and that we together agree that we can minister in that area. But it was just me doing what I always knew to do, and that was to help another woman. So when I was helping other women, they would spend longer time at my home. So I didn't have a lot of boundaries. I was just doing a good work. I was just doing good things, you know, at least believing that. But sometimes that might sacrifice your own family. Do you know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
I saw my mom always serving, and so I can go back to where it starts. My mom would always serve like whoever would come in need. But at times, sometimes we're the ones, the family is the one that actually misses out on seeing really the fulfillment of that strength as a family bond before you start to minister outward. So I was just doing it.
Okay.
Doing it,
Okay.
the busy.
Yes.
It was secondhand nature to me. So
Okay.
there was no boundaries.
Okay. So
So-
when you mean there is no boundaries, is it like the boundaries, the people who are coming in, or the boundaries in to what you did?
Well, the boundaries with your husband, you
Yes.
and your husband,
Yeah.
like I believe that if you have a friendship and you have a love relationship, we know that love does wane. So when the love wanes, you go back to the friendship. If you used to love to go to the movies, you'd go back to the movies, that kind of thing. To try to bring back that spark and just
Yeah.
keep, because marriage isn't always easy, right?
Yeah, date
You have to
nights.
work at it. You have
Yes.
date nights, do things you
Yes.
love to do together. So we had let a lot of that go.
Okay.
And then it became a pointing game. Look what you're doing, and look what you're doing. And you know what? I'm just as much to blame with the look what you're doing, look what you're doing, right? We can't think that we're all just perfect in that place. But it's in that space where I think God just enters in and he says, are you two together as one? In everything. In the helping, is your spouse supporting you? Or are you just doing it because you're going to do it because that's what you do and you're going to do what you're going to do? So their pride gets in the way. Independence gets in the way. I'm just speaking from my point of view. I'm not speaking from his and what he was dealing with. I'm talking about what I was starting to get stronger. I was starting to get more forthright, but then I was going to do what I'm going to do because I didn't know. I really was doing it out of how I grew up.
So serving
Serving.
is something you grew up doing.
Yes.
But at the same time, when you are serving, that's when the door for the negativity or for whatever that was also a contributing factor to you, to your family breakup.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and now I understand when you said the people you were with in the ministry and the pastors and so on, they were not there. They were not present helping you along this journey. Is that that's how that came about?
So that's correct. So I only got my pastorate in the last 8 years.
Wow.
So it's been 12 years since my husband left. At that time, the pastors that were there at the church didn't support. Basically, how I saw it was that they actually took a side. And I tried to deal with it head to head. Like just try to come in with that, what does scripture say about looking after, the orphans? What does it say about the widows? And how important that is as a church to look after those areas. I did have, however, a couple of people in the church. One was a very special friend. She's a police officer. And she was amazing at just keeping me on that path of not trying to skunk out a lie. You don't want to get something in court that says that you've got a police record because you're trying to check out where he is. Do we have to check out where our husbands are?
No.
And so in that place I didn't have that rest. I was in unrest. So I had a police officer friend, a couple of them actually, who prayed with me and knew the Lord and so on. The second one was a couple who knows right from wrong. And thankfully, I can honestly say that it was their covering, their prayer covering of a man and wife together that gave me the strength to kind of go forward. They showed up one day. On the outside, I was mentioning that the house looks amazing. $600,000, $700,000 home. Looks great. But inside was a broken woman. And they were amazing to bring over bags of groceries, not even knowing that I didn't go shopping. I didn't have enough energy. I had to look for a lawyer. I had to go and take things into consideration that I didn't know how to do. Like when you have little kids, it's really hard to try to balance all that. And how was I going to even pay for it? So I went through trying to find out what was my next step. Always, what's the next step in the process? So this couple would come over with food, but it wasn't just food. It was things for the kids' lunches that they'd make, like baked potatoes with, just TLC. And then I had some other friends who would sew into me, or would come over and just fold laundry. Or if I'm down and out, they didn't come and say, oh, well, you need to do this or you need to do that. They actually said, you want to go see the kids at the camp?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go get a car that you can rent. Or, they were the ones that were the instigating factors of, you can do this, Di.
Yeah.
We're not just here as a fair weather friend. So what started to happen was a collective of God-fearing people that came and stood with me, not as the ones that I had been on the journey with.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Just this new, these new, and it feels like I've known them forever.
That is interesting. So, and all this while now, where was your husband when you are suffering with the children? You're not able to do much. He just walked out of you guys, and that was the end of the story.
Yeah. So, like, he ended up, but he's just doing business. He's doing his life. To be quite honest, he's married now. He's actually gotten married. And I have a couple of boys actually living with him right now, which is great, He was just doing him. I really don't know where he was because life was going on.
Okay.
But I do know as a woman, every time my kids were over with my husband at the time, I had a huge pit always that I was left out. All the events that would happen, always all the kids were over there.
Yeah.
I was by myself. Every time there was a Christmas gathering, I'd do Christmas with the boys. But I'm left out. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just always those times where you're left out that you go through this place of, God, thank you that you have me.
The loneliness the heartache. You are so brave, Diane. You're so brave. And in all that, you are able to come out of that, break out of the diet, the eating disorder. And how did you come to break out of that, and out of that dark place, that place you needed help, you needed to be encouraged, to this woman who is so vibrant, who is just in the ministries, you are in everywhere, and in business settings and things like that. Because looking at you, it's like you're amazing, you do a lot. I admire you a lot for things that you do. Yeah, here you are teaching, you are involved in various ministries internationally and locally, you are an ordained minister, and all that. All this came after when you started finding yourself.
That's right.
How did you get out of there? Like, now, just like slowly, how did you get, like, step from people coming, holding your hands, praying with you, walking the journey with you? When was the point that you said, that is enough, I need to get up, I need to start helping people again, even though they have hurt me so much, and continue with life?
Again, that's something my mother had. Like, just through life not being accepted, because my mom continued to serve the church even though she never felt that she was accepted in the church. I think every one of us has it, Terry, to just get up one more day and know that whatever happened yesterday happened yesterday. So over time, a lot of it has been spent in the presence of the Lord. My journey hasn't been easy. Like, from 2012 till now, I can honestly say it's been a physical attack. There have been many things that have happened on the journey where I've had 2 concussions. I lost my license for a season. I was in the courts for 7 years with the divorce. I didn't just go and get divorced. It was not like a cookie cutter thing. And it got resolved the day before I was scheduled to go to trial. Because before God, I'd been working through step by step, but there wasn't a resolve. And I just had to lay down with the Lord and just say, God, this is it. I don't think I should go to trial, but if you want me there, I'll be there. And sure enough, we were able to settle. 7 years. But you know what the most amazing part is? When you love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength, God puts people in your path, even in the secular world. That God brought a lawyer who believed in me, brought a lawyer who did for pro bono much of what needed to be done. Because I trusted God and had people praying for me, the Lord brought people into my path that cared enough to see justice and righteousness arise. No, I'm not here to point fingers. Life happens. But I can say today that if it wasn't for God, if it wasn't for prayer, if it wasn't for this journey I've been on, I don't know how people do it.
Yeah, it's amazing how God has worked on you. And it's from you said it's from the early age. I think what they say usually, what you teach your children at an early age, they will never leave it. They always go back to that.